now. Like you can buy it, but maybe not necessarily are you using it in all, bringing it to its fullest potential. So that's why I think we're super lucky to have Kate here today. John, I will turn it over to you though to make a proper introduction, and then excited to hear from Kate on just that point about relevance and use of data.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I was kidding Kate earlier. We were calling her the queen of intent. I've known Kate for a number of years. And every time I turn around, Kate, you seem to get promoted. You have a different title. So you're doing something right. And you're the head of growth, VP of growth at Bombora. Certainly you would have a point of view on this and probably a whole lot more. So I'd be very curious to hear a little bit about what you think.
Yeah, I definitely have an opinion on intent data. I am one of the people who voted more than one. We are using first-party intent data, second-party intent data, and third-party intent data. First-party intent data, we pretty much consider what we're getting through like our marketing automation tracking on the website. And I think probably many of you are using that as well. So for those of you that said none, you might be just not calling it intent data. Second party data, we get ours from G2, but other kinds of review sites is what we consider second party intent data. So that's usually a pretty strong like lower funnel signal. So our sales team loves that one. So they're looking at the G2 data to be like, who is researching our competitors, who's researching us, and who do we need to call like right now? And then third party intent data, we use Bombora's, of course, but there are other providers as well. Some of our partners actually sort of mash a couple different kinds of third parties together in their platform. 6 Sense would be an example of that, where they take our score, our data, and put it in with their own intent data and give that extra boost to their predictive modeling. So I think the question really is like, what is the right intent data for you? And I know one of the topics that we wanted to hit on today was privacy. And with intent data, especially third-party intent data, there's a lot of questions around privacy. And that's a number one question that we get. And I would encourage everyone, as you're evaluating where your third-party, whether it's third-party intent data or other third-party data, asking the questions about whether they are privacy compliant, whether it meets potentially the GDPR or the CCPA requirements that your organization have, especially if you're working at an enterprise organization. But super valuable. Should I roll straight into Megan's question about how to operationalize the intent data too?
Well, absolutely. With multiple providers out there of intent, and you're eating your own dog food there. A lot of companies really wrestle with how do I operationalize it. So obviously you've got different categories based on first, second, and third party intent. Is it a one size fits all as you're operationalizing that, or do you take a different approach depending on the technology?
Totally different approach. That is probably one of the hardest things about our job selling Bombora's intent data is it can be used in so many different ways. And it's a really important part of our sales process is to get into discovery and figure out how an organization is set up, where their strengths and weaknesses are, where they're going to be able to operationalize the data quickly and get value and wins quickly, and where they might encounter some resistance potentially from other departments or from system administrators or whatever the case might be. So our onboarding process is pretty extensive in terms of mapping out what's the best roadmap for a company to find success. So a couple examples of ways you can, we always encourage putting it into the systems that you already have. So don't just like, you can work out of an Excel export from our UI that tells you all of the companies that are showing intent on various topics each week and manually manipulate that data. If you've got somebody who's like an Excel whiz, and then that person also wants to distribute that data to the team every week, that's one way to do it. And we do have customers that do that because they don't have a system administrator that can put the data into a system. That's not what we recommend though. Like we recommend, because you've got to have like really a committed person to doing that manual work every Sunday. So we recommend putting it into a system. So intent data is useful in marketing automation platforms to either segment your email lists or make your email nurture more relevant based on what people are researching that week. We see lots of people do that. It's useful in display advertising to say, okay, these are the accounts that are maybe lower funnel that should get a different message from the target accounts that we have that are higher up in the funnel. So we see a lot of prioritization there too. Putting it into, so there's two kind of ways to do sales prioritization, putting it into the lead scoring or account scoring model. A lot of marketers, so if a marketer comes to us and a marketer is paying for the data, then that's how they use it most of the time. So they're going to put it into the model, and sales doesn't really have to think about it then. Sales knows it's in there. Sales gets educated on what intent data is, but they know it's part of the score that they're already using. And I think, John, I know you've definitely operationalized it that way versus trying to train the sales team on what it all means and how to interpret the scores and how to filter the data. Just give it to them in what they're used to seeing.
Yeah, exactly. You're 100% right. And I think we stumbled upon this a couple of years ago, and how we stumbled upon it was the sales, in our experience in dealing with salespeople. I mean, salespeople are great and we couldn't be successful without them, but their capacity to learn new systems and train and understand, they don't want to know how the sausage is made. They just want to know, hey, who do I call and when? And intent kind of can feed that. So I violently agree with your point on that point.
Yeah, definitely.
Kate, you shared a fantastic example earlier that I'm excited for you to talk about with this group. Basically doing what John just said, right? Identifying a moment where there was really the right time to do some outreach to a very specific set of customers. And led to some good, some cool wins for you. Can you talk maybe a little bit about what you did and how it worked?
Yeah, for sure. So there's this is an example of using intent data in a way that most people probably can't, because you're not selling intent data, but it goes to kind of the overarching theme that we actually were talking about earlier too, which is just, it's really hard to get people's attention, and intent data helps you know who is going to be likely to pay attention to you. So we did a campaign earlier this week though, and it's an example of kind of my stance, which is you have to personalize if you want somebody to respond. It has to be personalized. You have to figure out a way to do it. It's really hard. It's really time consuming, but you have to make it happen. So we release topics, we add topics to our taxonomy quarterly. And these are, they're kind of like keywords. It's words that, or phrases that Bombora is monitoring across our publisher co-op of 4,000 sites to see who is showing intent on certain topics each week. So we update and add topics to that taxonomy on a quarterly basis as either people request them or we see topics becoming, like, words being more prevalent. It's kind of like updating the dictionary, I guess. But we include in those topics companies. So like Bombora, for example, is a topic in our taxonomy that we would monitor. So last week we released the new set of topics. There was about 100 companies we added to the taxonomy. So I put together a list of just 200 people from those companies. I prioritized, like, okay, these are their target accounts, they're showing intent, and we just added them to the taxonomy. So they should really care about our data now, because we're tracking who's researching their business. I sent them an email and it just said, congratulations, you've been added to the taxonomy, which means you can get higher quality data from us now about your company, and also that your competitors can start tracking you too, or start tracking who's researching your company. Do you want to learn more? Let me know, just hit reply, kind of thing. Got 4 demos in one day, demo requests for that. So I'm well on my way to my SDR quota now. I don't actually have one, but I'm very close. But it was just like, it was a super highly relevant, very timely, one-to-one message to people that we knew were probably already in market for our data because they were showing some intent signals, and that we knew we could help more now than we could last week. And so that message really resonated, and that was a pretty cool campaign that we just started doing and we're going to keep doing now.
What are some other ways you've seen customers use intent data that you thought were really interesting in terms of creating that relevance, that personalization? Maybe some that you don't see a lot of people doing, but you think more people should be.
Well, one way that doesn't get talked a lot about is actually using the intent data for your existing customers. So figuring out, so there's kind of two sides of that coin. There's identifying churn risks, knowing if you can see that your customers are researching your competitors, you should probably try to get on the phone with them quickly. And then the other way is just to be more relevant for potential either upsell or just like even better usage of your product, better educational opportunities. Our CS team is always paying attention to what our customers are researching, and sometimes it's even like it's not a tangible thing that we sell. Sometimes they uncover, for example, I noticed you were researching something that one of our partners offers, and we can go to them and say, let's just say contact acquisition, for example. We have a partnership with Sales Intel and Cognizant for contact acquisition. So if somebody's researching how to do contact acquisition better, and our CS team identifies that, they can go to the customers and they can say like, hey, did you know we have this partnership? You actually get a really great deal with them since you're already our customer. Just thought you might want to know. Doesn't make a difference to us either way. Like, they like it when we refer them, but you can totally use whichever providers you like. But here, this might be a good starting point, kind of thing. So just adding more value to your customers is a great way to use the data too. And I think we kind of forget about the CS team, even ourselves. We forget to market to the CS organizations a lot too, because we're so thinking about marketers because there's so many use cases there. And I think that's a really interesting area that we should, looking at myself, pay more attention to as well.
Yeah, amen to that one.
Yeah, it's a really
John's poll
sticky
next
area.
week. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Next week is that very topic with Hunter Montgomery. He's the CMO of Churn Zero. So yeah, it's a really interesting area because so many of us on the marketing side get incented for acquisition. So retention is like a muscle that's not well developed. So I could totally see what you're saying there.
Yeah.
Hey, can you share anything on, like, so when your CS team looks at intent data, how are they accessing it? I'm just curious, like right down to the, what screen are they looking at when they're accessing that data, if you can share that?
Sure. And I think Kenny had a question, so let's go to him in a second.
Yeah, Kenny, go ahead.
Do you want to, Kenny, do you want to ask your question first, and I can come back to that?
You know what? That was such a great question from Megan that I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that, and then I'll ask my question.
Okay, cool. So there's a couple ways. Our CS team does have access to Salesforce. So at the account level in Salesforce, where they're looking at the account plan already, they can instantly see what that organization is researching that week. Now, the CS team is not necessarily looking at every account every single week, so they might miss it. So we've actually used Looker to build them a dashboard where they can look historically too. So it has the intent signals over time, so they can look back really through the whole customer lifecycle and even before they became customers, just to see the research patterns and what they were looking at. And so that dashboard is available to our CS team. It's available to our sales team. The sales team can use it when they're doing prospecting as well. And we're probably, sneak peek, going to release it to customers soon as well. I think it's in alpha. So it's just a Looker visualization. You could totally do it if you're an Excel whiz. That data is available as well. I for one cannot look at Excel and be like, I see a pattern. I have to have the visualization. So that's really that's been really helpful for our CS team and for our sales team as well in doing their demos. And they use it because sometimes to just show prospects what the data looks like too. Like, look at what we can see about you. Which sometimes they're like, and sometimes they're, but no, usually they're like, that's really cool. Now we need this data. So visualization matters, people. It's very helpful.
I love that. And Linda just asked a related question, but I'm going to go to Kenny first and then back to Linda for her question, because I think it's related to what you just said. Go ahead though, Kenny. Sure.
Hey, Kate, nice meeting you. I'm really curious to get your perspective on sales teams' feedback when you ingest in intent signals from accounts or target accounts. And the signals are valid, except for they're still early on. They're still in learning phase. And one of the things, like, do you ever see a lot of rejection recycle reasons being do nothing or company is still early? how do you I guess help the sales teams, or can you understand intent signaling that is more late stage in the journey versus, hey, I'm just in my early learning part of the journey, even though a lot of these prospects are still willing to take demo meetings, like they want to use the rep to learn, which is not a cheap proposition, right?
Yeah, for sure. So we try to combat that with setting up the signals correctly in the first place. So what I mean by that is marketing has our set of topics that we monitor that are much, much broader. Like people researching marketing challenges. It's very broad. And then in order for something to get scored for the sales team, they need to be researching either Bombora, intent data, one of our competitors, or like a bunch of topics. And so then that's when they go to the sales team as these are the ones you should call now. So it's the setting it up from the beginning and then educating the sales team on like how we've set it up so that they understand when they're coming over. Now they still own accounts and they can still see intent data on those accounts, but the ones that we're signaling for them are really those stronger signals. And then we also can use our historical data. So what I was kind of just talking about, we use that historical data to identify which are the lower funnel topics based on buying patterns, and then which ones aren't. And we update those, and we actually just adjusted it like a month ago because we had a couple in there that we were like, these aren't strong signals. These need to move up funnel. Like these people are not ready to buy yet. So you can kind of change that and adjust that based on the data, and our customers do that as well.
Got it. Super helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jenny, what kind of platform are you using from an ABM perspective, if you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, no, not at all. So we use 6 Sense.
Okay.
In the past I've used demand-based. Where I am today, I'm using 6 Sense. I'm not sure if I recall if Bombora's OEM into 6 Sense or not. I got it.
We are. There's a little bit in there, and they just made it really easy to up the data if you want more of it. And yeah, I mean, 6 Sense is like such a good platform for operationalizing the data because they kind of just tells the sales team what to do, as long as you get it set up right. But yeah, no, that's a good one. Yeah, check in, make sure you've got enough Bombora data in there.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. And you got two different, because you're familiar with both platforms, right? Demand-based, you have a lot of control over the engagement and the configuration and the minutes and the scoring algorithm. Whereas 6 Sense, it's a little bit more black box.
Yeah, exactly.
You kind of turn it over to 6 Sense. Now, the one advantage that 6 Sense has though, is you can have multiple models. So, of course, everything costs a lot of money. For any MarTech, but you could test a couple different models to see if there's a correlation between those different models and the relevance of opportunity that gets created. That could be another way to do it. Or flipping back to what Kate was saying earlier, another thought would be if you look at G2, as she was saying, it's really good for down the funnel activity. So if you're able to triangulate and say, hey, these are kind of almost pre-MQAs, what 6 Sense is identifying. And if your product is on G2, which, that's a whole nother kettle of fish, but that could show you more intent interest that is more serious down the funnel. That could be another way to slice and dice it.
Yeah. And sorry, one last point is that one thing that when I just joined, you guys were talking about was just the number of different intent signals and the ability to stitch it together. It's interesting. I think that I see more and more marketers making the pitch for data science to be able to stitch first, second, and third party data together, because you either get a black box if you only trust one source, there's other rich sources, and you need to manipulate in an intelligent way. And I think that what's happening right now is that if you don't do that, you end up with either a large volume of leads that aren't converting, that sales loses confidence in, or there's just not enough because you're over tightening it. So.
Yeah. And that's a great point. And I didn't mention that, which I should have when answering your question too, is we don't just use the Bombora signal to tell sales these accounts are ready to be called. We're also like looking at whether they're on the website or seeing if we count how many contacts we have at that company engaged, which I think 6sense or demand based does for you. We don't have those, so we do it manually. But like looking at all those other data points that you have too that are showing an account might be ready to engage, and pairing that together. So intent's kind of our starting point, but we are also making sure that they're on our target account list and they fit and we can sell to them and they have the tech install and whatever. So yeah, definitely data science is very helpful to start mashing together all the different data points we have, but it's becoming critical because buyers expect that you know what they need and that you were there to help them get it, and that you can almost read their mind. So the data helps really do that.
I had some questions on sort of operationalizing it, because I'm wondering, how, like you always hear with inbound leads, they go stale immediately. How long do you feel the intent signal is valid, and how soon should you act on it?
So our intent data updates every week. And it's at a company level, not a lead level. So that helps make it a little bit more reliable and smoother, because usually like if you see a spike for like just 1 week, it's usually like an anomaly. If you see research activity happening for like a month, you're like, okay, there's a project happening here kind of thing. I think, and I guess part of this depends on your definition of inbound leads too. Inbound leads for us are like hand raisers, and we don't ignore them no matter what. They've asked for a demo, we're going to give it to them, even if they're not showing intent. But the other people that come to the website and they download an ebook, for example, or read a couple of the different pages on our site or whatever, that we do rely on that signal a bit more. Part of the usage of the signal depends on what you're doing with it though. So for display advertising, for example, I would not recommend putting in a list of accounts that are showing intent 1 week and then the next week just removing all the ones that aren't anymore, because with display advertising you need that repetition. So we put in and leave in, and then we take them out after like a quarter or roughly a quarter, maybe a little bit less, if they're no longer showing intent, because display you just have to keep that repetition, and it doesn't make sense to serve an ad to somebody twice and then stop. It's like just lighting money on fire. So, but for your sales team calling, if they're showing intent 1 week, sales team calls in that week. If they stop showing intent the next week, maybe ease up, or maybe just offer them something of value, but then kind of like stop saying, do you want to talk to me kind of thing. And to your other question about the SDRs, I think that was you in the chat, right? Yeah. I see you've been researching. You can do it better than that, probably. Typically, we coach our SDRs to say, your organization is, based on things I know about your organization, you're probably in the market for X, or you're probably wondering how to solve for Y. And using that kind of language where it is precise, and they're like, oh, I am. I did download an ebook about that, but it's less like creepy. For us, though, we kind of test it because we sell intent data. And so it's the kind of quickest way for them to go, aha, that's what they sell, is to say, we can see what you're researching. So we try not to be too creepy about it, but like that's what intent data is monitoring research activity at companies. So we are careful with the language, but sometimes it's this fastest path to somebody going, oh, that's cool.
All right. I know we're coming up on time. I'm going to give an opportunity. Kenny or Linda, any other questions that you have for Kate?
I mean, you just mentioned that I think you said that it's more reliable at the company level versus the contact. And why would you feel that way? I would have thought that if I can find out, that's actually Linda Duchin, not my company, then, I'm going to have a much better advantage because I know exactly who was showing intent.
That's a great question. Are you the only person that's responsible for making purchase decisions at your company?
No.
Okay, so that's part of the answer. If you're researching intent data, you might be just wanting to write a blog post about intent data or joining a webinar about intent data the next day, and you want to come with really good questions. If 10 people at your company are researching intent data, that tells me your company has an initiative to invest in intent data. So it's a stronger signal when the company level of research goes from the standard baseline to an elevated amount of research. So that's why we think the company signal is stronger. Now, of course, I do need to find out who at the company to prospect. And we use a little bit more of the data to say, like, I can look at the topics and basically say it's a marketer researching, or it's a salesperson researching, or it's a CS person researching based on the topics, the other topics they're researching. And then I go into my contact provider and I look up, okay, give me the demand gen team. Now I'm going to go prospect them, or give me the display team, or give me the sales team, or whatever. And you are kind of guessing then in terms of who you're reaching out to, but you have a lot of clues. And generally you're going to need to reach out to 8 people anyway.
Good point. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yep. Kenny, looks like you've got a related question, and then we'll close on cookies.
Yes. So
we do both.
okay,
MQLs and MQAs, yes. And we call them AQAs because marketing didn't decide, the algorithm decided. But it's the automation decided. Automation qualified leads, automation qualified accounts. We use both, and the sales team mixed reviews on that. We focus more on the accounts, but sales is still, like, so many people have it ingrained in their head that they need leads, and so we also do the AQA. Yeah.
But do you find, Kate, that in that model, my running joke is that you're asking then BDRs to go from being street beat cops, effectively going one-to-one, to being a private detective, where they can see the account and figure out a account strategy and have, like, how do I get to Megan? Like, I'm going to get to Megan, but through these people, and work that relationship. Like, that's a different type of BDR that has to get skilled up. And like, one of my observations is multiple things have to happen. You have to bring in your enablement team. You've got to bring in basically different training mechanisms, things like that, to get them there. And I don't know if that's been an easy or hard transition for companies.
Totally hard. Super hard. But that's how, if anything worth doing is hard, right? Like, isn't that, there's the phrase about that, but yeah, it's difficult, and we invest a lot in enablement for our SDRs.
Got it.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment from Kate, that we see that universally right now, of the beat street cop to the private detective. I love that analogy. I might hijack that analogy, because every single company really struggles with that transition. Like, how do you really get there? And then where does sales enablement play into that? That is a really critical issue. So great point.
Yeah, and if it's working for you to just have them do one-on-one, don't change. But most people, it's not working anymore. So why would you keep doing something that's not working just because the other thing's hard? Like, you gotta stop doing stuff that's not working. So that was kind of our stance on that.
Okay, we'll have to have you come back and talk about how you make those trade-offs, because I think that's a really important thread. But would love, I know we promised people a discussion about cookies, and while it sounds like we would all love to talk about the kind that are coming up for the holidays, perhaps we should talk about the kind that are causing marketers fits these days. And I reposted the link that you kindly shared about how Bombora is thinking about that, but maybe you can just kind of give us some headlines on the transition to a cookie-free world and why that's not the end of the world.
Well, luckily, we are mostly B2B marketers, and cookies kind of play a different role than they do for B2C marketers. So I'm not going to touch on the B2C side, but for B2B, there's a couple things we're seeing. First of all, cookies are about identity. So what you need to be asking all of your data providers or all of your solution providers is, are you going to be able to still resolve identity when cookies go away? Not everyone will be able to. So there's a lot of people, the people that are really, really scared of that is the ones that can't or have not figured that out yet. So ask those data providers or solution providers or ad providers that. The thing that we will see is the publishers should, publishers who have their stuff together, should benefit from an increase in value here, because people are going to come to them directly and say, I need to know your audience. I want to buy contextual advertising directly, and just giving them a bit more control than they previously have had, and hopefully able to kind of reclaim some of that value that the bidding war of programmatic just drove down. So publishers that have data about who's visiting their site and what those people are interested in are going to be well positioned to sell higher priced, more valuable ad inventory that really converts for their advertisers. So I think that will be interesting to see as that transition starts to take place. And it's already happening a bit. Publishers are starting to reclaim their inventory a bit already. So that will be cool. But yeah, make sure your providers have plans to resolve identity still once cookies go away. Many of them do have plans too, by the way. It's not doom and gloom. Many of them do, but some of them don't. And you just want to be prepared. I think that's my biggest advice for marketers, is be prepared, know where you're going to see the impacts, and start finding ways to do other things or to figure out your way around it. First party data, people are really that's one way people are getting really serious about, like, oh, I have all this data about who's visiting my website. Like, how can I have more of it? Because first party cookies aren't going away. So anywhere that you've got those, you see opportunities for gains there. And then, like Megan posted the link, but Bombora's data, the identity resolution process we have is like extreme. It's very complex. And it will still work. And actually, when everyone started working from home during COVID, we actually proved that it still worked. The data showed that we were still able to identify companies even when people were working from their house. So take a look at your other providers and see what they can do for you, and just have a plan.
Excellent. Well, I think we're a couple minutes over here, but great ending on the conversation about cookies. And it's so related to the data privacy, which you started with as well. A lot of concerns, even with first party data with cookies, and kind of the trend of what to expect next is great to plan for. Megan, any closing thoughts before we kind of wrap things up?
No, just great discussion today. Kenny and Linda, thank you so much for your great questions. And Kate, thank you again for being our guest. And this was a really, really helpful conversation. Excited to share this recording as well, because I think so many people are wondering about these things. And yeah, thanks again. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks again, Kate. Next week, we have Hunter Montgomery. He's the CMO of Churn Zero. So if you're looking at the other side of the bow tie, meaning the upsell, retention, expansion, Hunter's going to give a point of view about trends that he sees there, or his company sees there on the other side of the bow tie. So look forward to that conversation as well.